Okay, we'd like to go ahead and call the regularly scheduled meeting of August the 23rd of Lake Forest Planning Commission to order, and let the record reflect that Commissioner Zach Meister is absent with all four other commissioners present. And with that, I'd like to invite you to all stand and join me in the pledge. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That takes us to our public comment section. This is the time in our meeting where if there is anyone in the audience that would like to address the commission tonight on an item that is not on the agenda, this is your opportunity to do so. Is there anyone here present that is want to address us for an item that is not on our agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none. And we'll go ahead and move on over to our consent calendar.
I'd like to pull item number 4 on the consent. The minutes, please.
Okay.
Within the minutes, it reflects on number 4, approval of the minutes, that the motion was made by myself and seconded by myself, so that has to be modified.
Okay, so we have a correction then that it was made by Commissioner Hughes and seconded by Commissioner Carter. Is that a correct understanding? All right.
I move for approval with those modifications.
And I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. That will take us to our public hearing items.
Our first public hearing this evening is use permit 5-12-2577 to amend a previously approved use permit to allow RV storage. The applicant recently submitted a request to continue this item to the September 13th meeting, and staff concurs with that recommendation.
Would this be an appropriate time to maybe make some comments to staff that could be passed on to the applicant? Because some of what came to us here is not consistent with what we had discussed as far as directions from the Planning Commission to the applicant, and I'd be happy to go through those items if that would help alleviate having this applicant have to come back to us an additional time. Or is it appropriate for us to discuss this with the applicant not present?
That can be discussed at this time.
Okay. Is that...
Go ahead.
Okay. A couple of things. In the staff's recommendation, it calls for screening behind the wrought iron adjacent to the entrance. In fact, our recommendation was to use landscape screening at the entrance and not metal screening. The metal screening actually was our fourth comment, our item of clarification. That was screening the interior fence and not screening the fence at the entrance. And I think that's important to understand. Also, when we were, I guess we didn't set a number, there were the trees on Indian Ocean, which we have covered. But if you can get a clarification for us when it comes back, there's a comment in here, or the suggestion that they use a higher hedge, and that is a pretty open-ended statement as to what is a higher hedge, so maybe we can get some clarification on that so we have an understanding before it comes back before us. And also the request was to specifically regarding the building fascia and providing some line of sight drawings showing that what we do with the landscaping may or may not be adequate to properly screen the building, so we can have a determination as to whether we want to condition a facade or some sort of a mansard treatment or improvements to the building. And I think those are the major points that I picked up that were not consistent with what came back before us.
Any other comments? Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead and we need a motion for this, correct? Okay.
Okay, I'll just make a motion that we recommend staff reconsider the points that were brought up here, present those to the applicant, so that the applicant may have an opportunity to address those at our next meeting on this particular item.
Could you also include to continue the item to the date specified?
I'm sorry, I thought that was, yes, and to continue the item to, do we have a date here? September 13th.
A second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Our next public hearing item is a site development permit for a church on Muirlands Boulevard, and Jennifer Mansour has a staff report this evening.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. This item is a site development permit for a new church, Iglesia Pentecostal Unida Latina Americana, located in the Forest Ridge Plaza. The church was one of 3 churches that went into Forest Ridge Plaza without city approvals. All 3 churches are located in tenant spaces with doors at the rear of the plaza near the single-family neighborhood. In the beginning of the year, the city received complaints from the residents that live adjacent to the property regarding noise coming from the churches. It was never confirmed which of the 3 churches, or perhaps a combination of the churches, were actually the cause of the noise complaints. The city staff met with representatives from all 3 churches and the owner of the Forest Ridge Plaza to discuss both the noise complaints and explain the city processes. 2 of the churches decided they didn't want to move forward with the process and moved out of the tenant spaces at the end of June. The remaining church, who is the applicant today, submitted a site development permit application. The church proposes to have church services on Wednesdays and Fridays from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And these hours are actually incorrect in the report, which states 7:30 to 9:30, so it's really 7 to 10. They are also proposing church services on Sundays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The site is zoned community commercial, which requires a site development permit for churches. Pursuant to the city's parking code, the church requires 23 parking stalls and has 8 parking stalls allotted to the tenant space. Accordingly, the church requires an additional 15 parking stalls. The applicant is proposing to share parking with the other tenants in the building. A shared parking study was prepared for the project in accordance with our city codes. Generally, the shared parking study concluded that other businesses in the building are closed when the church is in operation. Therefore, the church can use these parking spaces allotted to these tenants during church hours. A shared parking agreement will be required from the property owner. To address the concerns of the residents regarding noise, staff has added conditions of approval to the project to minimize noise impacts to the neighborhood. This church is in a tenant space that has a door facing the sidewalk that leads to the main parking area and a door that faces the rear of the property adjacent to the single family. Staff has included a condition of approval that church patrons may only use the front entrance and that the rear entrance can only be used for employees and for deliveries. Conditions have also been added restricting any outdoor activities at the site, requiring the doors to be closed during church services, and for businesses to comply with the city's noise ordinance. If at any time the church does not comply with these conditions, the site development permit may be revoked by the Planning Commission. With the inclusion of these conditions of approval, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt the corresponding resolution for the site development permit. We did receive a letter in opposition to the project from a resident in the adjacent single-family neighborhood. His residence is one of the closest residences to the proposed church. The applicant for the site development permit is in the audience tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for staff? Okay, great. Okay, well then let's go ahead and open the public hearing. And with that, we've got several people that would like to speak. Herman Camacho, would you like to come and address the commission? Okay.
My name is German Camacho. I'm here to answer any question you have.
Okay. Did you have any comments you wanted to share with us, or just...
Just about what I heard before, I want to add that we need to, a proposal is to put, to avoid noise to the neighborhood. We need to put some material on the doors. We need to put some noise on the windows to avoid more noise. So that job is not done yet. So that's the only thing I think is going to improve.
Okay.
It's the only thing we need to do.
Okay,
Okay.
great. We appreciate you coming. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. I also have a Jose Ramirez, is that correct? Yes. All right. Would you like to come and address the commission? Again, just please restate your name and your city of residence.
Hello there. I've been living in the Lake Forest for 20 years. I think my name is Jose Alvaro Ramirez. I come to tell you guys that we try to do the best to disturb our neighbors. We don't make any noise. We keep the doors closed when we're in service. We used to have two groups that was a little bit noisy and close by us, but I think it's gone. No, now it's only us right there. And I don't think if we really, say, make a noise and disturb our neighbors, we don't go that late in the service. And we always keep the door back closed. The front door is closed when we're in service, so I don't think that there's no any problem to them. So I think that's it.
Okay, well, great.
you.
Thank you very much. And we have Ken, is it Poiter? If I mispronounced it, I'm sure you'll correct me.
It's Piotr.
Piotr? All right. And your city of residence?
I live at 24371 Blue Ridge. I've lived in Lake Forest for a number of years. And I oppose the church. I live right directly in back of the property. And to go through since January 2011, I've sent 5 emails to the Lake Forest Police and Code Enforcement, mainly because children are playing out there in the parking lot. Between the medical building mainly, but in the alley, usually 9 to 10 p.m. at night. And I've gone out there, I've talked to one of the churchgoers, and I only saw one parent and like 6 or 7 kids from the ages of 8 to about 4 running around at night, which I don't think is safe, and I don't believe kids belong out at that time of the day throughout the year. In the past, not so much to me, but to a couple other homeowners that live near or adjacent to me, the churchgoers have been rude to the homeowners. We've had trash thrown in our backyards. I believe in February of this year we had one business owner in there that almost hit one of the children with their car in the alley. And when I called the Lake Forest Code Enforcement, that was what I stressed, safety. I don't think that was being looked at all. I don't think the 3 churches have been good neighbors. I don't think they're good for the community. I think they've been disrespectful to the privacy of our homeowners. The pastor, my neighbor, I tried talking to him at one time. A neighbor of mine tried a bit harder than I. The pastor was not willing. Again, we had 3 churches. We don't know which one's in charge. Every time you talk to one, it's somebody else's fault. We're getting the runaround. The thing that really annoys me, since 2011, these 3 churches have been operating with no permit. You know, we're supposed to be a city. You got this planning council. I'm not sure what the manager of that center is trying to do, but I think he's just trying to put occupants in those buildings, permits or not. And we're not happy with that. We're tired of it. I also will let you know that in 2005 there was another church there, And I called the Lake Forest Police on that for the same thing. An assembly between the medical building and the units in question, the Forest Ridge Plaza, made a lot of noise, kids running around, people all over the place. This has been going on for years. And that's pretty much what I have. I have the emails if you want to see them. I didn't bring them with me, but I believe it's a matter of public record.
We appreciate you coming and sharing with us. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address us on this matter tonight? Okay. No. We do have someone. Okay. We do ask that you would fill out a speaker card. You did. Great. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Please just give us your name and city of residence.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Board of the Planning Commission. My name is Gracie Duran. I live here in Lake Forest, and I've lived here for about 4 years now. I just wanted to talk about a couple of different issues with the church, and I'll just call it the church to abbreviate it. I just wanted to let the Commission know that we started calling the Sheriff's Department in December because of the fact that they were having loud parties or noises, making loud noises in December of 2011. Some of the items that were not addressed in the staff report was the children playing. And I actually do have photos. We took a photo of children playing out in the thoroughfare where delivery trucks drive through. So it's definitely not a safe place for children to play. They're unsupervised. And if people ask why I know that they're unsupervised, they actually tear out the vegetation. They throw it over in our yard. We found toys, balls, all kinds of various items in our yard, and we also have dogs. So luckily, no sharp objects have damaged our dogs or our vegetation on our side. They say that they're going to have a kids' room, but this doesn't guarantee that they're going to keep the kids inside and keep them in a safe place, because recently they have been outside and they do play outside and make loud noises. I actually emailed back in June to staff and told them that it was 10:45 and we called the Sheriff's Department. So we're constantly calling the Sheriff's Department because of the fact that, and my husband works very early hours. Our neighbor actually starts work at 3 o'clock in the morning, and so he's not able to come today. But it does disturb the neighborhood, and this is definitely not a neighbor-friendly church. You know, they say that they're a Christian church, and it's not very Christian of them to put us through this inconsiderate type of atmosphere.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you coming. Oh, okay. Mrs. Duran, would you mind answering a question from here? Sure. Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Hughes.
Mr. Duran, thank you for coming to talk to us here this evening. Do you have a recollection of when your most recent complaint of noise and trash may have occurred?
It was in late June.
In late June.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Looks like we've got some exhibits. You have a question of staff?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Anderson.
There were two other churches that were occupying the same center.
Yes.
Were they occupying these same suites?
So one was in the suite directly adjacent to this one. So the other tenant spaces in the same building are only half of the tenant space. So basically, they only have entrances facing the rear of the building. They don't go all the way through like this church is going to be doing. So the other two churches had 800 square feet facing the building.
Just, if I may interrupt, when you say the rear of the building, are you talking about the center of the complex versus facing the medical center?
Yes. So they only had entrances facing the medical center. There were two of them. One was in the tenant suite adjacent to it, closer to single family, and I believe the other one was 2 tenant spaces over.
So they were all using the medical building side as their main main entrance?
Yeah, at the beginning, all three of them were using the medical side
Yeah.
entrance as their main entrance.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody want to take the lead?
I'd like to ask staff one question also. When they are parking their vehicles, are they parking those vehicles on the side between the medical building and this building, or are they parking in the Forest Ridge Plaza? Is that parking area considered part of that discussion with the parking, or not?
So there's a row of parking up against the building that is part of that center. And previously, all three buildings, I believe, were using that back area. We have asked, since we've been in conversations with them, we've asked this tenant space, since they have a front entrance, to use the front entrance, although I haven't been out there to determine if they actually have been using it.
But my question is, the parking that is adjacent to those rear entrances are part of this center?
Only the spaces that are
What
directly
are
adjacent. The ones across
adjacent
the way
to
are
both?
actually part of the medical center, which is a separate property owned by a separate property owner.
Okay. So the property line goes down through the center of that drive aisle?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Hughes.
Another question of staff, if I could. I don't know if you know this question, the answer to this question. When did the other two churches move out?
The other two churches moved out at the end of June. However, one of them at the end of June actually moved to another tenant space away from the residences, but in the same center. And we quickly caught that they did that, and they moved out, I think, about 3 weeks later. They actually moved into the Dragon Buffet
And-
tenant space.
Sorry, say that again?
Temporarily moved into the Dragon Buffet, and our code enforcement went out and said, you can't be in this location, and they actually left quickly
Okay.
the second time.
Do you have a date that we received the last complaint from residents regarding any of the church operations, any of the three?
I don't. Can I have you speak in the microphone?
Yeah, would you
Sorry.
please come to the
Thank
podium?
you.
I made a call in late July. I was walking through the center, and I saw lights on in the Dragon Buffet, and I looked in the window. There was a gentleman in there. I went around the corner to the medical center side. I saw a door open. I saw a church set up, chairs, and I went home. I kind of watched. I saw people coming in. Yeah, they basically parked, in front, but there were some over by Avila's restaurant, too. I saw the people walk from there into the church. When I got home, I called the Lake Forest Police, and a police officer actually went out there. I think his name is Mr. Officer Alvarez. And I sent an email to Code Enforcement telling you just what I'm telling you. And the officer went in, he observed it, and put it in. He observed a church service in the building. He asked me how they got the keys. I said, I have no idea. You might want to call the Forest Ridge property manager, because somehow they opened the door. It wasn't forced. So I told the police officer he wanted to know what he wanted me to do. I said, just put it in your police report, in which he did.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Carter?
Yes. With regard to the complaints that have been filed, it appears that we do have officers that have gone out. What I find interesting is if there are officer reports of complaint, who are the individuals they talked to and which congregation were those individuals associated with? I mean, it's a very simple question as to, if you've had a police officer there, we ought to know who he talked to and which congregation that was in. So do we have any information pertaining to that?
I spoke with Lieutenant Higa of our police department, and the report only has that they went out there and that there was a noise complaint, because I asked exactly the same question, but it didn't have any information about who they talked to or the specific location. It had a general location, which wasn't helpful in this situation. Didn't have the suite number or anything.
If I may, this particular applicant has always occupied these two suites?
As far as I know, yes.
Follow-up question. The complaint that was placed in July was because they were occupying the Dragon deal, which would have been a different facility?
Right. It was the church that was originally in Suite H relocated temporarily to Dragon Buffet. However, and because of the location of it, there actually weren't any noise complaints because they were actually much farther from the residential. But we had more than one person tell us that they had moved there, and code enforcement, well, at least when code enforcement found out, we went out and they left actually pretty quickly because we'd been working with them for 3 months to get out of the first location.
Yeah, so their reason for vacating was more of an application issue than a noise issue, correct?
Yes, there are a couple issues. There's some building code issues. All churches have to have 2 restrooms. There's exiting requirements that are limited in this area. And they also need to have the shared parking study, which you need to have someone prepare and go through the process.
Yeah.
And the other 2 churches are a little smaller and didn't have the resources to do that.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
And Mel, this actually would be directed at you, if you would, please. If this project were to be approved and there were to be subsequent violations, what would be the timing of measures to mitigate any problems that may continue to exist or may occur independent of anything we've seen to this point? Specifically, is it something we can respond to in a day, a week, a month? Maybe you can help us out a little bit to understand that.
Sure. Well, the ultimate remedy that is held by the city and the Planning Commission is revocation of the permit. Now, that is not immediate, as you're asking, but just to kind of start from a broader perspective, there are conditions that are proposed as part of the application that address noise, location of individuals, back doors, et cetera, et cetera. If any of those conditions are violated, even one time, that permit can be revoked. Now, there are not conditions that require, for example, compliance within a matter of days or hours of a alleged violation or complaint. We could certainly draft those and put those in. But as the conditions stand right now, as the resolution stands right now for the SDP being requested, the ultimate remedy would be revocation of the permit, which is a pretty big stick that the city and the Planning Commission holds.
Okay. Yeah. If you'd like to address this, would you be kind enough to come and address this?
My name's Karen Shore. I'm a resident of Lake Forest, also within the neighborhood behind these churches. And the question was asked, what's the repercussions for the next set of complaints, which we all anticipate happening? Now, you're saying that the permit can be Mal Richardson, that the permit can be taken away, but what does that actually mean to the tenants being in the space and then having to come out of the space so that we can be resolved of the problems that are happening in our neighborhood?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So, did we get an answer to that question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Planning Commissioners, I gladly address your question. Revocation of a permit is a somewhat time-intensive process, although if violations of any condition occur, that revocation process can begin immediately. Typically, it takes a matter of months to notice the hearing and hold the hearing. But for example, if the SDP were approved tonight and a violation were to occur, let's say in 3 weeks, immediately upon the violation, thank you. Immediately upon that violation occurring, if it were a direct violation of a condition, the hearing could be set, and that could be held in a matter of weeks.
Okay, great. Does that satisfy your question? Okay. You are absolutely welcome to come and address us, yes. All right, we just need you to state your name and city of residence and then give us a speaker's card when you're finished.
I will do that. My name is William Shore. I'm a resident of Lake Forest, very close to the church. I also hear the activity from that church very late at night. Extremely loud noise coming from it. I know it's this church. I've driven by there myself. I've driven by the doors that are on the drawing that is on your website. My opinion is that we should not grant this permit at all. These people have been in violation of the zoning laws, as I understand it, for some time, and they are a pain to the community about them. With the idea that they are already in violation, and we've had trouble with them, I don't see any reason to grant them a permit for something that's not allowed in this center to begin with. I don't see any reason why, as a community, we should allow them to move in there or be in there. They shouldn't be in there to begin with. And this is a use of the space that is not allowed there at the present time. Why do we make an amendment to what we currently have? I will fill out one of your forms.
Thank you very much. Did you want to readdress the commission?
Yes, I would. I'd like to comment on the length of time. This has been going on for well over a year. Just the permit process. And this gentleman here, Mr. Richardson, is telling us if you approve this, we have to go through weeks. We've already been through, from what my emails say, well over 18 months. And I can go back to 2005 if I want to get police records of complaints. And I'm telling you, this area, your planning commission, in my opinion, is spending too much time on new development and letting all these older areas in Lake Forest kind of dwindle. And it's time we speak up. We've got other businesses there that have caused problems. This probably is one of the biggest. I could start talking about dog pounds. I could start talking about red zone internet cafes. I could talk about 12 years of trying to get the lot sweeper to conform to Lake Forest code. And it just happened about 3 months ago when the lot sweeper started his little thing at 7 o'clock in the morning. That has been going on since 1997. So that's why I'm sensitive. My neighbors are sensitive to time. I hear what you're saying, sir. But we're kind of running out of time. Our patience are thin. We've kind of had enough. So.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Richardson? Do you have a comment? No? All right. Okay. Come back to the podium so we can make sure we get it on record.
Karen Shore. We're talking about this church and these different churches. Where's the repercussions for the manager of this center? I mean, he's brought in all kinds of things that are illegal, and I don't see him represented here at all. So what is the repercussions against this person? I assume it's a man. I've heard stories about him in the past. We've had the medical marijuana places. We've had the massage parlors. Now we've got these noisy churches. I mean, it's like, is he the invisible person here? What do you actually do to this manager of this center? That's what I would like to know.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
With all these violations.
All right. Okay. Well, gentlemen, we need to have some discussion.
Let me kick it off first to explain some of the circumstantial things that occur. And it's disturbing. I understand the concern that's there. The City of Lake Forest does not require a business license, so we're probably the last to know what business goes in until such time as we've either got somebody in there that's not there's a complaint filed. The parking issue is noted. There's been a change in venue as to what was permitted in the area. Not until such time as the city becomes acquainted with what is there any reason for us to initiate the process that we did, such as code enforcement. The absence of a business license system is not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it's a very good thing, because a business license requirement is a paper chase, and I've worked through and with business or cities that have that activity, and it doesn't help remedy the problems. So what we're going through is a result of that to some extent. I have some concerns, and a lot of them stem from the lack of information we've had from the police services with regard to the actual culprits that were involved, if you call that. Okay, I understand the issues that are there in this particular section of this center. I know we've discussed multiple times as to the occupants that were put in there. I think we've had a dog training thing. We had the, paid handball courts and things of that nature. And to answer you the question that was raised at the end, we actually have no recourse that I'm aware of against the property owner or manager of the center unless a violation were filed directly against that individual, which probably would not come before the Planning Commission. We're addressing particular issues that are there with a tenant issue. Okay, so be that as that may. This is frustrating to me in that I do know we've had issues, and in particular this section of the building being in the very back. It's an echo chamber. I'm fully aware of that. And I do have some concerns. And a lot of it is I'm afraid to approve something that I know in my heart that within the next 2-3 weeks, maybe not much longer than that, it's going to be back before us. I just feel that at some point we're going to end up addressing this, and the revocation hearing process is lengthy, though it's not difficult to initiate. And I'm not that in favor of initiating a process where I condition the process saying, one strike and you're out, or that's essentially what we're saying. So I'd like to be able to be in favor, and a lot of times I'm willing to give benefit of the doubt, but in this particular one, I just don't know if this is the appropriate spot for this because of noise. I think it restricts the applicant from what they're trying to do. Churches are a mingling type of activity, so after you've had your service, you're generally standing around talking, things of that nature. Kids do run around and play around the church facilities. So for that reason and that reason alone, I'm not real comfortable with this one.
You want to go next?
Sure, I'll jump in. The center has always been a challenge, very clearly. It's an antiquated layout, no question about it. But at the same time, it's not our job to make any business successful beyond any limitations or privileges that we grant any other business. So this is something that the owner of the project is going to have to deal with. I don't know that the project location necessarily doesn't fit a church as far as the shopping center itself, but within the shopping center, I just don't think this particular suite or group of suites is the appropriate location. I mean, if it were to be in the old Dragon Buffet or one of the units closer to the Dragon Buffet, away from the residential properties, then it would probably be more appropriate. I understand why the landlord puts them in that space, because there's no street exposure and it's just a place for a retail establishment is not going to thrive, and that's been the history of this site. I think the residents have legitimate concerns, and as we have stated many times in the past, we're here to represent the residents of our community, all the residents of the community, and consider the concerns of all the residents of the community. And I think the concerns of the immediate residents are overriding to those of the applicant in this particular case. I just find it difficult. You know, I know from the testimony here this evening, I understand anyway, that a lot of these concerns appear to have predated the departure of the other churches. But it sounds like maybe some of the concerns have gone on after that. And in addition to that, we're looking at some fairly late hours of operation, which would impinge upon the use, the residents' use, immediate adjacent residents' use of their own properties in a manner that's comfortable to them. We have people who retire early, and yet we have an operation they're asking to extend their service till 10. We've heard testimony that's gone beyond 10. So, you know, it's difficult. I don't want to discourage any church activities in the community. I think it's an essential element for a good character of the community. But I think we also need to carefully weigh the concerns of the residents who are directly impacted by whenever residual comes from any business that we allow in the community, and we've done that in the past. Based on that, I just have a difficult time supporting using these two suites and giving a permit for the use of these two suites for this particular application. If they could move it down closer to the Dragon Buffet or in the Dragon Buffet or something like that, I think it becomes a little more reasonable, a little more controllable. You're now moving it far enough away from your residents that I'm sure a noise study of kids playing out behind it, the Dragon Buffet, would support that it wouldn't be a nuisance to the neighbors. But because you're only one suite away, which basically is putting it, I'm going to guess, between 50 and 60 feet from the rear property line of the residence, that's, we put more restrictions on the Orchard Center and their equipment trucks being behind the building after hours than this. So, in short, I think as it's presented to us here this evening, I just can't support it.
Commissioner Anderson, comments?
Sure. Let me first say that I'm really pleased with, again, this commission, because I think it's working the way it's supposed to. When I first looked at this whole project, I was trying to be in favor of what I saw here, because what I saw was an applicant who was trying to comply and perhaps didn't really understand all the rules before they started the whole process and before they started their church. And so they came to the city after being complained to, and is trying to do the right thing by going through the whole process. They've gone through their parking study, and the parking is not a problem from what I can see what the engineer has put together for us. But because of the points that have been brought up, certainly by the residents and by my fellow commissioners, I think I have to concur that I would like to see the church remain, but not in this location. I agree. I think they're certainly something our community needs more of. But I just think there are some extenuating circumstances with this location and the hours of operation that create a problem with this particular application. So I have to say that I don't think I'm in favor of what I see either.
Okay. Well, I find agreement with almost everything that my fellow commissioners have articulated here tonight. Again, with maybe one exception, and I looked at this much like the way you did, Commissioner Anderson, wanting to find agreement with it, but knowing that somehow it doesn't seem to fit. I would be very concerned if the church moved up to the vacant spot from the old Dragon Buffet to the degree of safety. because people turn into that center going to the El Ranchito restaurant there. I personally would not sleep well at night thinking that I was involved with moving the church up into that area and potentially putting children at risk. As much as I would like to say yes, in agreement with my fellow commissioners, I cannot support this application. Please do.
Regarding the children's safety, and I would certainly not want to compromise children's safety, but keeping in mind that this at one time was a Chuck E. Cheese, and it had an abundant flow of children going in and out, so I'm not that concerned with that aspect of it. So, if it were to come back as the Dragon Buffet Church of Lake Forest or whatever, I would not object to it on those grounds at any rate.
Any other comments? All right, get a motion?
I will make a motion to deny and close the public hearing.
Commissioners,
If you could change that to recommend that staff bring back a resolution for denial for our approval and then close the public hearing, then I would second that.
Thank you. Why don't you make the motion and I'll second it? How's that?
I'll make that motion then. We recommend for denial, request that staff bring back a resolution reflecting that and close the public hearing.
Thank you for looking after me again, David, and I will second that.
Are we okay, Gail?
can we, we'll try and have that back on September 13th, the next meeting.
Okay, great. All right, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, our next item is a use permit for a new mini satellite horse racing wagering facility with late night hours. And the staff's recommendation this evening is this item be continued to September 13th.
Okay. Can we just approve the staff recommendation? Do we need a motion?
I'll move.
All right. Rube, second?
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
All right, and then moving on, the last item on the agenda this evening is a discussion on potential amendments to the city's parking ordinance. And Carrie Ty is here this evening to kind of walk us through that discussion.
Good evening, Chair Verplank and Planning Commissioners. I would tell you I have the evening's most interesting item, but I don't. Okay, before you tonight, we do have a discussion of a topic you are fond of, the city's parking ordinance. As you know, over the last few years, we've been gradually updating the zoning ordinance as time permits. And recently, Cheryl Kuda managed to update the non-residential land uses ordinance. That's a major accomplishment. So that allows us now to update the parking ordinance in accordance with that new land use matrix. I remember, if you remember, one of our past discussions was that until the use table was updated, there was no point to update the parking table because we were just going to change the whole thing again. So with that, we wanted to touch base with the Commission on the list of topics to be addressed when we review the parking ordinance and determine areas that would need updating. And we've included a list of items on your agenda report. They generally include revisiting the parking standards for residential as well as the non-residential uses, like I mentioned, oversized vehicle parking, parking lot standards, parking lot landscaping, and other topics such as parking for alternative vehicles and accessible spaces, etc. And so during tonight's discussion, we would like to hear from the Commission as to your thoughts on the items that we've listed, and also welcome input on any other items in the parking ordinance that might benefit from a review at this point in time. So following tonight's discussion, the plan is to return to the Commission with a schedule and a work program on updating the parking ordinance along with the finalized list of topics. And with that, we'll open this item for discussion and look forward to hearing your input. Thank you.
Questions for staff? Good. Oh, Commissioner Carter.
I got a question for you. Would parking along the surface streets be something we could look at in conjunction with this as to, does it pertain, the off-street parking, if you have parking on residential streets, parking along our sub-arterials, and the whole litany of concerns that come along with those? Is that fair game for discussion during this review?
Actually, the purpose and intent of the parking ordinance right now is for private property to provide adequate off-site spaces. However, there are certain instances where on-street parking is used and is allowed by the code, and it's certainly an area that we can add to the list of topics. Is there a specific situation that you would want us to maybe hone in on? Sometimes that helps frame the discussion a little bit.
Okay.
Would it be, for example, would you be talking about for new development, for redevelopment, for existing development? I'm just giving you some ideas.
Let me give you just, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll give you your thunder next, okay. With regard to RV parking, things of that nature that are, they're not posted. I know that there are times when neighbors come in, they put their vehicles on the street, and they're supposed to be there for 24 hours, et cetera, yet it's not a posted item. How do we enforce that, and how do people become aware of that? That's my concern. We have parking issues that are there, that are within the ordinance, yet there's no way that the constituent is apprised of those parking restrictions that may be there. I know homeowners associations will have within their CC&Rs, parking in the driveway. You can't put your RV out there or your boat in front of your house for more than a day, because I've had several occasions where I'm out there a day and a half loading up my boat, and I've got a complaint from a homeowner thinking that I can only have it there to pick up the people as though I was going to drag them down the street in the boat. These are ordinances that are on the books. However, no one is cognizant of them or what their inherent restrictions are. How long can we put a boat at the curb, whether it's attached to a vehicle or not? I know I've had issue with my boat where I have pulled it in from a trip, had to go to work the next morning, decided I'd leave the boat at home and go to work, and to come home and have neighbors, insisting that I'm unable to park that vehicle there without it being attached to the vehicle. I don't know. Okay, how do we apprise people of those inherent restrictions? Parking in the driveway. We have certain vehicles that are over length, extend over the public access and walkway, yet there's no way to apprise the individual that that is in violation, as far as I know, because you're in hindering the public access along the parkway. And just those types of issues that we have, but yet we have no means to communicate them. And I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could possibly look at those to see what we might have and how we can address them. I don't want to get into the deal where we're talking about parking on street sweeping days and that. I don't want to get into that one at all. I don't think that's warranted. But there are certain items that I think that it's to our best interest to at least discuss.
David, I think that if the over-width, over-length escort vehicles didn't stay with your boat, it probably wouldn't be that big of an issue. But absent of that... We have discussed residential parking on a number of occasions, and one of the things that I would like to see addressed with some degree of analysis would be the change in residential parking so that we can anticipate and plan for that with our new development, recognizing that when new development goes in, it typically addresses or appeals to younger families, and when we see those families age and have more and more drivers, we see more and more cars, and the parking standards are basically set around younger families, younger households, not maturing households. So I think we need to give consideration to that and have at least an element in our planning that we can anticipate that. If you look at any of our older communities within the city, you'll see that they're woefully underparked. Clearly they were probably adequate at the time that the projects were built, but as they've aged, some turn into rentals, where you get multiple families just by the nature of our neighborhood, our community. That's presenting a problem. So I think when we look at parking for residential, we need to have a vision and an understanding of where that community is going to go and what its requirements are going to be when it matures. It's easy to anticipate what it is when they build it, but I think that needs to be an element of our consideration when we're talking about residential parking, whether it's multifamily or single family. So in both of those categories, I think we need to have an area that we can understand and do some planning. This is a planning commission, so we can do some planning on where it's going to go in the future, not necessarily where it is today, specifically with respect to parking. A couple things you bring up here that are interesting. Parking enforcement. That to a certain degree, that I would think would be a police services issue, because there currently is a vehicle code that prohibits parking on sidewalks. Now that pertains to public, not necessarily private, so maybe what your intent here is that we discuss that as far as parking on private property, shopping centers, that sort of thing. Historically or typically we see a lot of motorcycle parking on sidewalks in shopping centers, particularly if you go up to the Foothill Ranch area. You'll see out in front of a couple of establishments, they seem to enjoy using the handicap ramp to access their own personal parking on the sidewalks. That, I think, is a valid area to consider in how we would address that and how we would enforce that on private property, of which a shopping center I would assume would fall into that category. I like the note you put in there regarding bicycle racks and electric vehicles, alternative vehicles. Here again, we're a planning commission. Let's plan for the future. I think we're going to see more use of both of those elements of transportation, so we need to be planning for it. So it's an area that I would like to see some attention given to. The backup areas and drive aisles, interesting, but I'm not sure if we're necessarily lacking in that. Maybe we can get maybe a brief description if somebody thinks that there's some dysfunction in that area. If you have some ideas that we can throw around to allow us to focus on it. I'm not sure, based on what I understand of our parking aisle requirements and widths and so forth, that there's necessarily a problem there, but there may be that I'm just missing. I think you bring up you've noted an interesting point here that warrants some consideration, and that has to do with driveway widths, particularly for our older neighborhoods. I think it's important that we give consideration to maximum driveway widths so we don't wind up with landscape areas that are now nothing more than front yard parking lots, and we have seen that on a couple of occasions. I think it's important to be able to maintain the integrity of our older communities as well as our newer communities, to have a standard that the city wants adhered to. And let's see, there was one other area in here that was of interest, and I have lost it here, forgive me. If it comes back to me, I will come back to you.
I guess I can chime in here, maybe a couple of items that haven't already been covered. when I was going through the existing stuff that was here, I know this was a point that Commissioner Hughes had brought up once before about trying to address some of our residential parking as well as our multifamily, but residential in particular with all of our OSA development coming in. Looking at our current code, I see that there are certain space calculations that are made based on the size of a dwelling and the amount of bedrooms that are in a dwelling. But I see them as all fractional considerations, and maybe that's an inadequate calculation as we watch the neighborhoods age, as Commissioner Hughes may have pointed out at one point. The multifamily stuff is always a problem, and I'm not quite certain how we can address that with the way perhaps some of our development agreements have already been written. Can you get parking space and development all fit in the same space? One begets another problem. So, but it's something that has to be at least addressed and discussed. I know that in talking with some of the people up in Portola, that they're complaining more and more and more about, and their neighborhood is not that old, but they're having more vehicles parking in places and jamming up all available space as their neighborhood ages. I didn't notice anything, and maybe I just missed it, talking about the possible adoption of parking permit areas, different residential areas developing some sort of permit process. If a neighborhood finds that they're having a problem, can they implement a residence parking permit which would distinguish those that are full-time residents there versus the guests? I didn't see that in here. I don't know. Maybe it's there. I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I know that there is a residential parking program somewhere else in the municipal code. It's covered, and I think that's because our parking ordinance more pertains to private property, and that's a sort of a governing of public property. But there are certain standards that are needed. The issue of residential permit parking has come up, and some of the causes. I think the goal is to look at some of the causes of why you end up needing that and try to address the causes before they happen. And so I know the list we've compiled here is actually a result of a couple years of hearing about all the challenges and the problems that have come up in various areas of the city. And if you look, I think under multifamily residential, under the last bullet, there's an item in there, for example, to consider the issue of rental complexes or homeowners associations that charge tenants or residents for parking spaces, for example, because when you charge somebody for a space, they might not pay for it, and it might spill over, and so that might be one of the causes that a neighborhood is suffering from having a lack of parking, because there's spillover parking that's created by another cause that might not simply be attributed to a lack of parking, for example, that there's some issue. And so we've been trying to look at those, but certainly, as parking problems arise throughout the city, I know that the parking permit process gets talked about. It's not quite in my part of the code, but we're aware of it. And so if you want us, I can bring back some additional information on that, just so you kind of understand how it fits into this.
Isn't that not a way that we can address some of the overpopulation issues with some of our single-family dwellings?
It would be hard for me to speak to that. I don't. For my knowledge, and just so you know, I grew up in an area with residential parking permits. If you live there, you got a permit. There wasn't a cap on the number of permits. That means they might issue 100 permits for, an area that only has 20 spaces, for example, or maybe 1,000 permits for an area that has 200 spaces. So as long as you showed proof of residence, you could get a permit. There was no number cap. And so I don't know whether one relates to the, it could have a correlation. I just don't know if it's directly.
Actually, maybe this is a question
for you,
Mal. Are there personal rights issues that would come into play here where you would limit the number of permits that would be issued to an individual that lives in a certain area?
That is a complicated question.
Thank you.
And it's a good question. It's a complicated question, which has to do not only with with our ability to regulate, but also typically there are HOA issues involved, which gets fairly complicated. But it's certainly an issue that we can take a look at. It would require some degree of research by staff, but we can take a look at it and come back to you with a more solid answer than that's a good but complicated question.
Well, I mean, I could see where you have somebody who just likes vehicles, and so they acquire a lot of them. Should they have the right, or should they be denied that right to park them in their neighborhood? I guess that's really the question.
That's a very good point, because I do have a vehicle individual in my neighborhood.
Yes, you do.
That has 6 vehicles, 3 parked in the driveway, 3 in the garage, and he's fortunate that he has the 3 in the garage. There's other issues where we have people that have so much stuff in their garage that they don't have any place to put their car where it's supposed to be designated. That might be something.
Well, with HOAs, I think you have more control over those sorts of things. But if you don't have an HOA in an area, well, then you kind of lose out.
You really don't, even with the HOA. None that I'm aware of have ever addressed that particular issue. They tried, but there's no way to regulate it. It is an issue, and it's a clutter situation where you either have people putting too much junk in their garage that they can't put the car in the garage, or they have so many vehicles that they spill out onto the driveway, the parkway, the front yard, and every space in front of their house. And that lends itself to working on those vehicles, every single day of the week. So there's a lot of issues surrounding that.
If I can chime in with one more comment. Beyond this being a complicated issue, and I think Commissioner Carter's comment is correct as far as HOAs go. I'm aware of a number of HOAs in the city and also where I live that attempt to regulate this and fail miserably, but it can be regulated. There are state code provisions that deal with the length of time that a car may be parked on a public street. That is typically 72 hours, but it's only enforceable if there's signage. So there are ways for us to address that aren't extremely complicated. As far as permitting goes, that's where it gets more difficult. But you do see in some jurisdictions with parking issues, like in Newport Beach, where there is permit parking. I mean, there's signage all throughout West LA, where I spent 3 years of my life going to law school, that only permit parking by permitted residents. And so it's possible. It's a difficult issue. The easiest way is, again, that 72-hour requirement that's in the state code. But again, we can look into it.
What are the requirements on posting? Is it just posting as you enter the city, or posting on the streets?
Particular street?
On the street itself.
On the particular street. Yeah. Even then, it's still somewhat difficult. We actually dealt with this issue a week or so ago within the city, so it's fairly straightforward in the state code. But again, enforcement is difficult, because what does it mean to move your car?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Okay.
Oh, much.
Can I have one more?
Go for it.
You have on the parking lot landscaping. I like what you've got in there: tree wells, planters, et cetera, but can we look on the permeable aspects of those islands that are in the we're being confronted with runoff and things of that nature, and I know they're coming up with designs with regard to the tree wells and things of that nature, that instead of putting a 6-inch curb to prevent the water from getting in to penetrate the soil, they're changing or altering their flow pattern, whatever it is, to allow that water to actually get into that tree well so that it's able to stay on site.
Okay. I have a neighbor that's like yours. I've got a 3-car garage, 3-car driveway, 5 cars, 2 permanently parked on the street. And 2 have been permanently there for more than 2 months. Unfortunately, there's no signage, so we can enforce the 72-hour rule. But those are the kind of things, and there's a number of reasons that occurs. I agree. There's families that are expanding. We've got bounce back families living in. Adult children moving back, and so forth. I understand that. I don't understand. Well, I don't agree. I understand. I just don't agree with using your garage for a storage bin. And if you look at self-storage, is one of the largest industries in the state. We are a society of people that don't want to give up things. We have our stuff, and we're not going to give it up no matter what. So we're going to keep adding and adding to it. I'm just always amazed at how people can have hundreds of thousands of dollars of vehicles parked outside when they've got $10,000 worth of stuff in their garages. And I'll quit right there on my own editorializing. But I think and I agree with what Commissioner Hughes said, as we look at future developments, we need to look at longer range than just getting these developments put together and launched. We need to look at what's it going to look like 20 years from now, 15 years from now. Are we really taking into consideration so that those communities stay the way that they were intended to be? Because in our older communities, we're all suffering because they're not what they used to be. They're not what they were. So this is a great thing. I mean, I looked at this, I said, oh, I'm glad we're talking about this. Let's keep going. This should be something that we really, in my opinion, need to focus and really drill down on and really solidify in the next few months.
The comment that had eluded me came back to me when Commissioner Carter made the comment on parking lot landscaping. I think under the county code, I thought at one point we had some standards for parking lot landscaping, and then a few years back we issued some permits to at least one shopping center that I know of for sure that went through and basically tore out most of their parking lot landscaping. Speaking specifically of the center at Maryland's and Ridge Route. And the explanation that I had was we didn't have a standard that required any parking lot landscaping. So that being stated, I'd like to have a careful review of that and some discussion about percentage or ratios of landscape area to parking area or landscape area to parking spaces or something of that nature. And Commissioner Carter had a great comment regarding tree wells. I think a lot of that will take care of itself with, won't take care of itself, that we need to address in general terms when we're talking about our landscape materials, drought tolerant and that sort of thing. But specifically, let's look at bringing some of the landscaping back into some of the areas that we seem to have neglected, and more importantly, future developments. We do have a couple of very large parking lot areas in our community that are fairly recently developed within the last 10 years that have virtually no on-site landscaping. I mean, you can look at the Home Depot, any of the Home Depots. You can look at the center up at the Walmart. I mean, you go through the community and you'll see that anything that's been developed in the recent years is pretty sparsely landscaped as a general rule. So anyway, that was my other comment. I think you have plenty of things that you can work on to bring back to us, and we certainly hope that you'll have final resolution on all these items by the September 13th meeting.
Okay, so the next time we come back with a list, it's going to be a lot less general and much more specific. So what we'll do is, for each of the general areas, each of the general topics, you'll have subtopics, and then each one will have, an analysis of some sort, and then we can revisit some of the more the areas that you talked about tonight. But thank you for the suggestions, and very good.
I have one question with regard. We're working on this now, and as we have applications that come before us, this will not be in effect. However, is there any way that we can emphasize to the applicant that this is in review and that they could possibly take it into consideration? I know we can't hold them to it.
This is in the context of the opportunity study, I assume.
It could be in anything. It may not be
I
the
understand.
opportunity study. We may have somebody who's coming through and they're looking to revamp their parking lot.
I understand. So the question is, while the planning code revisions are under review, yeah, we can absolutely emphasize the importance of the potential changes to applicants. We can't hold them to that, but yeah, the sky's the limit as far as emphasizing that with applicants.
Could we make a suggestion possibly that we take a look at what may be on the table or coming to us in the near future? I'm sure that applicants come in and do some preliminary work with us before they submit, and maybe then focus our attention on those areas that may be of more urgent need, i.e. we have a commercial project coming before us. Maybe we need to look at those parking regulations that pertain to commercial. We've got another residential outside of our opportunity study area. Maybe, I'm just throwing this out, so maybe we need to focus in on those areas. So let's I guess do our preparation on a needs basis. I know it puts another element into it, determining what the needs may be, but that might help alleviate some of Commissioner Carter's concerns.
Sure, and I think I understand where the Commission's coming from, and like I had mentioned earlier, this list of topics is sort of gleaned from, well, as long as I've been here, and even before then I had a list passed on to me of all the different issues we've dealt with, and a lot of them have been through the discovery process during the review of discretionary projects. So for example, in reviewing commercial projects, we've asked applicants to install tree wells and install landscape fingers at certain intervals so that they're not so far apart from each other, and having done that, thought that, hey, that might be something great to put in the code so that future applicants can come in and see that. And so this is sort of in the middle of an evolutionary process, and I don't think by any means it's straying from the norm to, while we work with the applicants during a development review process, to encourage integration of some of the ideas that we're encouraging, basically. So yeah, I think that falls in line with our general practice.
We got to stop talking because other things come up as I'm talking. You just triggered a thought. We're paying particular attention to the vehicular deal in commercial centers. We've also got to pay particular attention for pedestrian access coming through, so they're not walking through the tarmac and trying to keep from stepping over or into and through tree wells. So it's a consideration that needs to be taken.
All right. Well, that looks like that wraps up our discussion on that. So I guess that will take us to our comments. Anything from our Assistant City Attorney tonight?
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. All right. How about our Director?
No comments this evening.
No comments this evening. All right. Mr. Hughes?
I'm not out of words. However, it's hard to believe, isn't it? Actually, I have no further comments.
Mr. Anderson?
Actually, I just have one question. We get this wonderful list from Development Services about project status. And was the church product that was brought before us tonight, was this so last minute that it never made this list?
It was originally came in as a use permit, so it might be under the use permit section. And when we changed the code, it actually moved it to a site development permit. Is it not in there under use permit?
I didn't see it on here at all. I was just kind of thumbing through it. Maybe I'm, again, overlooking it. But I would have thought it would have been in here, so we would have had some warning, because I felt a little blindsided by the whole church matter tonight.
I apologize. It should have been on there. I don't see it either.
Okay. I didn't miss it then. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Carter?
No comment.
And I have no comment. So we will adjourn to our next regular scheduled meeting. Thank you very much.